the next Friday morning small group sessions. In March of 2021, as COVID was kind of easing up enough that we could get together in person again, we started with small groups of about a dozen, and we morphed that to 20 or 30 or today 60 to talk about different topics that are impacting our communities and our region. We try to do it in more of an informal session instead of everybody sitting there and watching a PowerPoint for an hour. And last year, 2022, we began partnering with the Urban League on these events with Gail and her team, and we do these all over the Upstate on Friday mornings, so it's really a great way to engage folks and to have a conversation on important topics. So I want to introduce Gail, and then we're going to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves, and I'll do that here in a minute.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Dee. I'm Gail Wan, President and CEO of the Urban League of the Upstate, and had the opportunity to meet a few of you in this room, but not enough of you. So certainly the Urban League, had a presence here in Spartanburg, and then during the transition, we were no longer had programs here. I'm really excited to be back here. I'm really very grateful, Tisha, and to this incredible leadership team, and so many of you in this room that have really worked with us to come back to Spartanburg. Chancellor, thank you so much for our awesome new office at the Georgia. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And we'll talk more about all of that. We're very, very grateful to you all for being here. And we are the Urban League of the Upstate. We do have programs all the way, from Anderson County, Pickens County. We've been in Union County for 10 years. Spartanburg is my home. I live here. So I'm appreciative to learn and to be part of this community as well.
So for those who have been to our sessions before, I just want to tell you that you're getting off easy today, because typically as we go around the room, I ask everybody a question related to our topic, and it can force people to kind of think a little bit. But today, because of our numbers, we're not doing that, so you guys are lucky. But what we do want to do, it is important to know who's in the room and who is part of this conversation, because part of our idea about collaboration and bringing people together is to meet each other and to know who's part of the discussion, hopefully build new partnerships and relationships. So we're going to start here and go around. We'll go here to this table, then back around, and then to the back. But just if you will just stand up and say your name and the organization you represent, if you represent an organization, and then we'll introduce our panelists, Keisha, as we get into the program. Ma'am, will you start for us?
Yes, I am Cynthia Jeffers, and I'm representing or here on behalf as well of the Spartanburg African American Culture Committee.
My name is Kim Scott. My name is Kim Scott. I was invited on behalf of the Starting Now program, and I'm here representing them and also Wells Fargo.
Hello, my name is Taj Swift. I'm too a part of the Starting program, and I'm an educational consultant with Taj Swift.
Hello, I'm Alicia Harris. I'm also here on behalf of the Starting Program, co-owner of Needs Resident Services, providing services for special needs.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Yolanda Crittenden Jones, and I am here representing Public Education Partners in Greenville. We are actually in the same building as Urban League, and I am the Community Advocacy and Government Affairs Coordinator. I'm glad to be here.
My name is Malcolm Latima. I'm also here with the Starting Program, and I'm on the team lead.
Good morning. My name is Vivian Timber. I'm also with the African American Committee, and I also represent the Benjamin Mays Alumni Association. We at this time are working with Spartanburg County Foundation, Mary Black Foundation, Spartanburg School District 3, repurposing what was most recently the middle school of Packard, which was my high school, the Benjamin E. Mays Consolidated School. We're repurposing it to the Benjamin E. Mays Family Resource Center in Packard.
Awesome.
So my name is Rebecca, and I was invited by Starting Program, and I'm the owner of Joanne Safe Haven Elderly Community Center.
Awesome. Dr. Harris?
Good morning. My name is Penny Harris from the Chancellor Agency Upstate. I've been in town for about a year and 6 months now. We have so many wonderful partnerships with many of you, and so we're looking to escalate those partnerships to really advance and support what we're doing here together in Spartanburg and Dales. Thank you.
Brian McFly.
I'm Kate Woodward. I'm here representing my daughter Stinson, who is unable to be here. And we are with J.W. Woodward Funeral Home. We've been serving this community for 107 years. Now, I haven't been there all the time. But I have been there 50 of those 107 years.
Good morning, my name is Stacy Bevel. I am a professional coach and own Golden Career Strategies. And 9 years ago this week, I moved into this neighborhood. First time in my life I've ever felt really rooted and grounded.
My name is Russell Ward. I'm with Zone Engineering in Greenville. I do business development. I just like to get out into the community since I cover a lot of the upstate, see who's out, what's going on, and just learn about it.
I'm Taylor Shapka with Greer Development Corporation. We're the Economic Development Group in Greer, and I've never been to an event that Russell hasn't been at, so that's not well. But I'm the Chief Engagement Officer, so it's my job to find resources for industries, businesses, and merchants to make sure that they are successful and sustainable in Greer.
All right, we'll go back to.
Good morning, I'm Emily Lozier. I represent Spartanburg Methodist College, the Career Development Office. I work with students and employers in the community, building those relationships to get students placed in internships and jobs. Have a lot interested in history, and I have a lot of first generation students.
I'm Erin Dukes. My company is Launchpad Ventures. I do mentoring, investing, and asset management.
I'm Aaron's intern.
Internships, right?
My name's Craig Chardon. I'm the entrepreneur ecosystem facilitator for 10 at the Top.
Go to this table. We'll go around. Okay. No, okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Kayla Hill. I work with Live Healthy Spartanburg and United Way of the Piedmont as the Community Health Equity Coordinator.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Devin Stewart. I currently serve as the program officer with LIST Upstate, South Carolina. Myself and my executive director, Dawn Deck, I'm standing in for her. We do small business lending and also grants.
Good morning, my name is Caitlin Meyer. I oversee intercultural education and engagement at USC Upstate. I'm also a member of the Urban League Young Professionals.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca Wade and I work with Upstate Forever. I serve in the Clean Water Program and I'm looking to be more involved in the Spartanburg community. Really happy to be here. Hi, I'm Anna Gurian. I'm the Upstate Region Diversity Equity and Inclusion Specialist for SCPEC, and I am here in place of Katie Corderi, our health director, who could not make it today.
All right, let's finish with these and we'll go back to our field. You go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I am Dr. Makisha Bates, and you want to introduce yourself? And this is Bella, and we are here as guests of Mr. Rich Kennedy.
Hey, good morning. I'm Keith Flood. I'm with Loop Recruiting. I do business development for them. So if you're either looking for a job or employee looking to find good people, then we marry those two and hopefully have a successful partnership between them. And I have 2 small children, so I find it very important to collaborate in the community and make sure that we're making it better every day for those little ones too. I'm Lucy Southwell. I'm the outreach coordinator at Chapman Cultural Center. One of the projects our department helps manage is the Southern Studies Fellowship of Arts and Letters. It is a partnership with the Hub City Writers Project. We bring in 1 writer and 1 artist into Spartanburg for 9 months. I say all that to say that others are here today, and I am them.
Hi, I'm Sarah Nixon. I'm a Southern Phillips artist, courtesy of Chapman Cultural Center and Hub City.
Hello everyone, I'm Desiree Evans. I'm the writer here with the Fellows Project as well, and I'm coming out of New Orleans with this
So good to have both of you here. Okay, we'll go back to this page. Yes, you.
Good
Good morning, I'm Kimberly Shell. I'm with the Greenville Technical College Foundation, as a development officer, so I help raise money for the college, for the students. I'm a native of Spartanburg, still live in my childhood home in Woodland Heights, and it's nice to be back here.
Yes.
And it's nice to see my fellow leadership classmate Taylor over here, so, good morning, everybody.
Good morning, my name is Latokia Trigg, and I'm the area director for Ready SC, which is part of the technical college system. We're the economic development arm of the system, and we assist new and expanding industry with recruitment and training.
Good morning, I am Sierra Kelly, and I'm here representing the Spartanburg African American Heritage and Culture Committee, as well as I'm the Executive Project Director at Regenesis Healthcare.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Erica Rhodes, and I'm with Spartanburg Regional Healthcare System, and I also work with the Healthy Spartanburg, another program on the regional, the Healthy Union, and Cold-Fire Cherokee, and the work that I do is community health needs assessments, community health improvement plans, daily walks and stuff.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Witt. I work for the United Way of Piedmont with Kayla, and I was invited to come here by Lakeisha, and when Lakeisha asked me to do something, I jumped. No, but seriously, she's in charge of the Start Me Cohort report, and I work with some of those folks too. So I'm really excited to be here. I regard myself as a historian, and I'm really interested to learn more about Spartanburg.
Great. Eric? Good morning. I am Mary Ann Washington DeCoop. That's one of my 6th grade students. Can you believe that? She's got 2 children. So anyway, I'm from St. Matthews, South Carolina, which is down near Orangeburg, but I've been here 55 years, so this is my last place I'm gonna be. And I worked at Mary Wright School 20 years and D.R. Hill Junior High School for 18 or 19. I was the first black female to go to D.R. Hill Junior High in Duncan, and there was one black man who went with me. That was in 1968, and so I was only out of college 1 year, so I was brave, like 22, 23, and I worked there like 18 years, then I went to Mary Wright for 20. So I'll stop there.
Hello, my name is Danny. I'm the owner and CEO of Spartanburg, focused on co-working and networking, helping people start, build, and grow their businesses. I'm also here with the Start Me program.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Jasmine Herbert. I'm here on behalf of my organization, the Employee Handbook Career and Workforce Solutions. I'm an HR consultant and career coach.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a guest of Jasmine Herbert. My name is Joel Buckmeyer. I'm soon to be retired Sergeant First Class in the United States Army, so I'm looking to connect as much as possible, certified personal trainer, and connected to the Upstate Positive Coalition as well.
Great.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathy Dixon, and I'm here with an organization called Apprenticeship Carolina. I serve in the role as a senior apprenticeship consultant. So if anyone is not familiar with Apprenticeship Carolina, we work with businesses across all industries to help them to establish and outline an apprenticeship training program. So I'm a guest of Dr. Dima Wan this morning, so thank you guys for having me.
Good morning, I'm Claire Russos with Keep on Spartanburg Beautiful. We're focused on litter prevention, beautification, and recycling again.
Good morning, I'm Gabby Pruitt. I'm with One Spartanburg Inc. I am the Business Engagement Manager on the business development.
Good morning. I was invited by Gail. I've been working with the Urban League. I just moved here a month ago, so I'm brand new resident. I moved from Los Angeles where I had an independent film company. I still have an independent film company. But it does feature film. We've done 7. I just opened No Restrictions Studios, South Carolina, LLC. And we will begin to be making very daring independent films here in the Upstate, and we'll give voices to underrepresented communities. And we're making some very amazing movies. And thank you very much for all that you've done to welcome us to Spartanburg, New York City.
over
And
here,
no,
Dean,
let
I'm
me
sorry.
finish. We've got a few more folks. So let me introduce you. Sorry, no one gets away.
I'm Tommy Stanton with the advocate, board chair for the Southside, board member of SIGA, which stands for Spartanburg Initiative for Racial Equity Now. I'm serving on a lot of boards, but those are the two main ones that I focus on, and been here all my life. That's one of my students.
All right.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name is Paris Booker. I was also invited by Dr. Gill. I am on the Urban League Upstate Young Professionals Board. I'm also an entrepreneur, and I am now the new Assistant Director of Project Outreach. So I'm excited just to be around Spartanburg president. Yes, and Spartanburg president.
Hello everyone, my name is RJ Rogers. I am the owner-operator of Happy Hair, a dishwasher safe, rust-resistant, and heat-resistant hair clip for resisting locks and natural hair.
All right, and we have some of both of our team here.
Yes.
Hey everyone, I'm Justine Ellen with Sen at the Top.
Gillette Tomlin, Urban League of the Upstate.
Hi, I'm Annalise Lewis Abrams. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for Ten at the Top.
And Marilyn, not gonna forget you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marilyn Weir, and I am with the City of Spartanburg.
She's done a lot of heavy lifting for this. So I'm so pleased to have such a great group here today, and I will say we do these sessions every month, and we started our partnership with the Urban League last year in February, doing a session on around Black History Month, and we did it in Greenville and learned a lot about the history there. And as we knew Black History Month was coming up again this year, we wanted to focus on great stories in Spartanburg. And we all know that our history and heritage is something we need to care about all year long, not just in 1 month out of the year, but this gives us an opportunity in February with it being Black History Month to kind of have a specific focus. And what I am so have learned in the 13 years I've been here, and I think you guys will see today, is the intentionality that has happened in Spartanburg to overcome decisions that were made generations ago to make sure that every person in this community has the opportunity to be successful. And I think there's a lot of great stories here, and we want to make this a conversation. So Keisha has been very gracious to agree to serve as our facilitator and moderator of our panel, but we will ask for questions. We have living history, we know, in this room, so we have about an hour, so good luck getting everything done. But, you know, we are so appreciative, and with that, I will turn it over to Keisha.
I'm out pretty big, so follow the agenda. We're gonna do self-introductions. Each person has 2 minutes or less. So if y'all see me hit the buzzer, that's because I went over entirely 2 minutes. And so I am Lakeisha Whitner. I work for the Northside Development. I've been there 7 years. I'm your first woman of color to run for mayor for the city of Spartanburg. In 2017, and then in 2022, I'm your first woman of color to run for County Council District 6 in 30 years. So, you see how history here on this part. Oh, now we're turning over the way.
My name is Brad Sankey. I'm with the Spartanburg County Public Libraries. We have a local history research room where we've got this tremendous collection that we've benefited from many donors over the years who turned over their family papers or their institutional records to the library, to the public for safekeeping. So that, and we in turn make that available to residents and visitors who are curious about Spartanburg's past, and we'll try our best to help answer your questions directly or to enable you to have the resources where you can answer your own questions. I've been there now for 13 years, and I think 14 is beginning in March. Prior to that, I was with the Spartanburg County Historical Association, but I'm a Spartanburg native. I've been interested in local history since I was ever. And I'm happy and feel privileged to be part of the panel today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tony Thomas. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Northside Development Group. I was former president of the Northside Board that many of you have heard of for 12 years, 13 years. And I lived in the Northside community for about 32 years. It's great to be here.
Good
Rich Kennedy, Assistant City Manager for the City of Spartanburg, and I was not a student from Gary White. That's a joke amongst us. She's a dear friend, love her to death. But I am a lifelong resident of our great city. I grew up in the center city of Spartanburg, a little west of downtown, Austin Street, Woodward Home, Summer Hill, Pioneer Hills, that area. I love my city, I love what I do. I'm very fortunate to be in the position I am to help shape our community. I would welcome you all to this amazing facility. We opened it in 2010. What you see is a byproduct of community-driven involvement, a very intentional effort of listening. This whole process started through a Hope 6 grant, where it was $800,000 set aside to renovate a facility that was constructed in the 70s. The neighborhood and community was not satisfied with that. And through several meetings that I was fortunate to be a part of, we now have this nationally recognized facility that was constructed in 2010. So we went from $800,000 to $7 million. And that's what this facility is. And it also led to the amazing facility we have on the north side of the city, the Dr. T.K. Gray Community Center. I believe that this community does it best when it comes to reconciling our mistakes of the past. And I'm gonna end there, but also noting the importance of those that are impacted the most having a seat. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Like Miss Emily, you all 2 minutes. My name is Jessica Scott Felder. I am the professor of studio art, or one of the professors of studio art at Walker College. I've been in Spartanburg for 7 years. I've gotten a lot done since I've been here. Spartanburg has been extremely supportive, and the community members have been as well, and had an open arm. I can definitely say I feel invited. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to Spelman College, undergraduate at Georgia State University. I'm academic, so I have to kind of list all that stuff. And I ended up here teaching at Wofford College, but as a professional artist, I'm very much into this idea of placeness, memory and place, and storytelling. First and foremost, I'm a storyteller. I grew up on the west side in Atlanta, Georgia, in West End, and there were tons of storytellers, and I'm seeing the African print. And this is taking me to the West End, where you go to the library and you hear the stories, either real life stories that happen in the community, or stories, African proverb-based stories or narratives. And that has entered my own work. I tell my own stories, but I also tell the stories of interesting people and spaces around me. I also grew up in Charleston, South Carolina during the summers. My mother's from here. And I would see a lot of monuments. So I'm growing up in Atlanta, seeing Dr. King, monuments for civil rights leaders, and then seeing monuments that are on the other side of that conversation. And I'm intrigued by that. I'm intrigued by that kind of tension that exists in those spaces, and ways of reconciling those two very different ways of looking at history. So naturally coming here, first question was, where are the monuments for people of color here? And I think every community needs a space where it can commemorate and celebrate its memory. And so meeting Representative Henderson Myers and meeting Brenda Price, of course Mitch, there was a wonderful collaboration with the city of Spartanburg to create a space. And it's not to say those spaces don't already exist. There are some, but I like to do it big. If you look at my artwork, it needs to be huge. And so I'm happy to be a part of the Southside Cultural Monument, which has been well over into 5 years of work. And now we're getting closer to wrapping that up as the visual artist, but also again storyteller. You know, Mitch and Brad have played many important roles in regards to helping me negotiate that history, as well as the Spartanburg African American heritage and culture community. So yes, vision is what's important. We're going to talk about, I think, the past. Okay, I'm getting to my. Okay, I'm I told you it was all 2 minutes.
I would like to say this about Jessica. She gets the award of the least distance to cover young black professional just built a home on the south side, right up the street.
esteemed panel around the applause for 2 minutes of introduction. So we are going to get started on questions. Before I get started, I do want to do some housekeeping. If you have to use the bathroom, don't wait and hold it. Go right out that door to the roundabout, and the bathroom will be there on the left. We will control some of the answers and questions here, so y'all, we will be respectful to our panelists as well as myself. And I'm thankful that each of you are here today, okay? So growing up here in Spartanburg, lived here, city and county, moved into Woodland Heights, lived in a community where we weren't invited. I can remember going through Woodland Heights and being ran off. So with that being said, my first question is, can any of you, of our panelists, can answer, tell us a little about the founding of Spartanburg and its early growth.
Maybe this will be conversational too, so I'm going to say my bit, but I want y'all to be able to chime in on all that too. So to look back on the deep history of how Spartanburg got founded, why Spartanburg is here, what led to the force of it being the city that it is today. So as far back as we have historic records, this area was Cherokee hunting ground. We speculate that there were likely Native American tribes that were here even prior to the Cherokee, but by the time that we have written records, they're considering this pretty much all of the upstate hunting grounds. We know that there were diseases that swept through the Native communities and decimated them in the generations prior to when we have historic written records. So it's quite likely that there were prior tribes that were in this area that sought refuge with the Cherokee or were entirely displaced in other terms in those generations before we know through what Europeans are writing down. But by the time that European and their African enslaved people are settling in this area in the 1760s, it's and at that point, treaties have been signed between the Cherokee and the English to enable that. But it's there aren't native peoples that are living here at that time. So the native influence in this, culturally speaking, in the society that we inherit, comes actually later on after people are moving into the area from the mountains to work in the textile mills. Many of those people have native roots distantly. So there's a little bit of a area there. But there's a courthouse village that gets founded in the center of the city of Spartanburg, Morgan Square. 2 acres, 1787. This is after the Revolutionary War. There's been a reorganization of the back country to have there be basically additional courthouses to sort of county powers. There's nothing prior to that time in that space besides woods and a path. So that 2 acres gets donated by the landowner there. Courthouse and jail are set up on the square, and the businesses and sort of residential life and everything that we know springs from that moment there at 1787. It's very, very slow growing. As late as the 1850s, the village, as they still are calling it at that point, even though it's been incorporated with the city beginning in the 1830s. The 1850s, it's 1,000 people that live in the village of Spartanburg. So it's tiny, tiny, tiny. About a third of those people are enslaved. Tiny amount of them are free people of color. Just a handful. And then the beginning of the growth that leads to an industrialized Spartanburg that has a larger presence in state affairs and sort of national influence to a certain extent later on, begins with the coming of the railroads. And the main railroad line that really spurs all that growth comes in the 1870s. So it's the 1870s and on up that leads to a recognizable Spartanburg. Spartanburg basically looks something familiar to most of us now. All right. Anybody else want to chime in?
I'd just like to say, Brad, you mentioned that it was mostly Cherokee nations throughout this area, and it was, and I have Cherokee heritage. What many of you may not know is that many treaties were broken, and the Treaty of Encota was one of them. And that treaty was the one that took the land from our people and we gave it to the settlers to go cotton, sugarcane, understanding, the city of Spartanburg was named after the Spartan Rifles, the regiment that fought here during the Revolutionary War. And just like Brad said, it was mostly a mill town. I live in one in the north side. So, and there's a whole lot of story behind that. But I think Mitch would be a good guy to give context to the history, since he's our city manager. He probably knows a little more about that than I do. My focus is on the north side of history and history of my people. So, Mitch, here you are.
Brad noted the industry, you know, the textile town, and the railroad, you know, like Hub City, that's where the Hub City name comes from, the railroad. And that was downtown was like a hopping place in Spartanburg in the early 1900s due to the railroad. People would stop and lay over in Spartanburg and party, hang out, go to the hotels, and so there's a lot of vibrancy in our downtown. The textile industry brought a lot of jobs, but it also in the county was agriculture. You know, even today they talk about Georgia being a peach state. South Carolina produce more peaches than Georgia. You know, I picked peaches as a kid, so it was amazing. So one of the things that I would know as we get into the early 1900s, the Great Depression, Spartanburg was classified as one of the hardest hit countries. I think the hardest hit country in the United States due to our dependency on the textile industry. 87% of the population, you can see that in this Spartanburg stories, was dependent on the textile. So in the Great Depression, so you know, it wasn't just the African Americans that were struggling; everybody was struggling. And that's kind of what led to some of our concentration of poverty, and it came about. And if I would just kind of transition to the like 1930s, you know, after the Great Depression, our city formed its public housing system in 1939. 84 years ago. We formed our public housing system. An investment of $800,000. $800,000. What are our financial people? Anybody want to take a guess of how much that would be today? 14 million, 14, 15 million. That's a huge investment. We don't have $14, $15 million to invest in affordable housing today. We don't. But there's two sides to that story, which is fascinating. That amount of money set aside at that time to structure public housing was viewed much differently then. It was, you know, quality, affordable housing, and for Spartanburg as well as the black community. So you had old white men setting aside $800,000 for black people. That's a pretty powerful statement. But they said, but you can only live here. And you can only live here. So the structure of our public housing system was set up to say, north side of the city, south side of the city, that's where our public housing. And so when you look at where our investments today to redevelop, still 84 years later, we're trying to address that decision that was made. So that whole formation of public housing has a deep, deep history in Spartanburg. Our mills have a deep, deep history. And I should have said this earlier. I'm only a part of this panel because our dear friend, former state representative Brenda Lee Price, can't be here today. She can't be here today because she's celebrating her 75th birthday. She's gonna be here tonight. We're having a party here tonight. So we got 170 people coming here tonight for the Love Fest. But a lot of history around public housing. I worked for the Housing Authority in the early 1990s, and at that time, the city of Spartanburg had the highest per capita public housing anywhere in the Southeast, higher than Atlanta. We didn't have as many, but per capita public housing. So just a little bit about the early years in the 1930s.
Thank you so much for illustrating the polarization of the north side and the south side. Most of you may not know that there was concentrated poverty in each of those neighborhoods, and we are working daily to combat those issues. So my next question is, and we're still in the past, y'all, we have present and future tense questions. So what were some of the ways that Black people in the community in Spartanburg organized to push progress forward?
I'd say that Black ministers were a big part of negotiating with the city and the larger kind of white power structure in the city during the segregated era. I think there were additionally lots of social clubs and organizations that worked together to leverage power and influence. I think that that those are probably some of the bigger factors in kind of working that. What period specifically is that question about? Just any period?
Sister Woodward, I wasn't around during that time. I read a little bit about it. But one of the things about, you had families like the Woodward family, like the Whitmire family, like the Bowmar family, influential families. During that time period, clearly, we couldn't go to the bank and get loans and things. And so the infrastructure of financial support was within the community. It was within the churches like many communities. We were in Columbus, Ohio, visiting with them because they're an inspiration to the mural that Jessica's going to talk more about. And they talked about how, you would go to, you would meet after church and determine who's going to provide a loan to this family, who's going to provide a loan. And I'm certain that those things took place in this Spartanburg community. And during that time period, one of the things about it was during those days, the infrastructure of the Black community was very different. You had doctors, teachers, all living amongst each other, living within the areas of one public housing. It was a village, right? It was a village. The interdependency of each other was existing. We don't have that. I still listen to a little bit of rap music. Ice Cube say we got Black folk that live way out, and come to church on Sunday. Yeah, that's right, Sarah. Living way out. Disconnected. I'm not talking about you, Sarah. But we didn't have that back then. We lived amongst each other. In leadership, it was prevalent every day. You didn't have to go far to see leadership. We live amongst each other. And today we don't have that. We don't have it. We see it on Sunday. But, it's interesting to me how we are so quick to respond to tragedy that's so far removed from us because we see it on social media. But we're so disconnected. We don't see the tragedy amongst us every day because we don't live amongst each other.
Oh, sure. Well, in the north side, I'm speaking of today. So in the north side community, we formed the Borgers. Many have heard of the Borgers, a community advocacy group. And the reason why the Borgers were formed so that this initiative, this north side initiative, would take place with the community and not to the community. So, and that was intentional. So, and the Borgers work to make sure that the residents of our community benefit from this initiative in many ways, all across the spectrum of how we can benefit. And we've been advocating with the city. We have many partners in the north side to make it happen. And we've advocated for the people of our community. And it's an idea and a thought that we've been trying to export throughout the city of Spartanburg and other communities who are in similar situations as our community was.
Could we touch on urban renewal? I talked about what the infrastructure looked like, but what destroyed that infrastructure?
Well, and I want to talk a little bit about the kind of creation of that infrastructure too, kind of how some of those early neighborhoods formed and how the formation of those neighborhoods was in a way a collectivization of what limited power was available to the Black communities in Spartanburg. So under slavery, most Black folks in Spartanburg lived adjacent or nearby to the white families that they were associated with. It was sort of a scattering of Black folks throughout the city. But there's a period of trauma that's really experienced in the years soon after emancipation in which there's a backlash. Because statewide, low country has a majority African-American population here and achieved considerable state influence under Reconstruction government. And that results in this backlash from many whites who are upset about this and inflict violence upon these communities of color. And that's collectivization of those neighborhoods is as much a consolidation of protection and power as they are now enabled to do by emancipation. Emancipation essentially gives folks the freedom to choose where they want to live. That's one of the main, and where they want to work is one of the main ends of emancipation here. So you have South Liberty Street neighborhood forming in that late 1860s, very early 1870s period here, anchored by Mount Moriah Baptist Church and by Black landowners, the Young family. So that infrastructure forms in that period there, thrives, it's like a separate black downtown, thrives through the early 20th century, and reaches a point in the 1960s, 1970s, in which the walls of segregation in businesses, institutions are starting to come down, and the money of those black communities ends up getting spread out to additional places beyond just supporting those South Street businesses and other black-owned businesses at this point. Additionally, you have white flight that's occurring from the city overall. So there's less funding to a certain extent to work with from a city government standpoint. And you have these old built-up spaces that are starting to show their age, and there's not money there to rebuild it in an organic way that the business might rebuild it right now. Also, lending practices are a difficult hurdle for black landowners at that point from banks. So you have South Liberty Street neighborhood overall starting to show some age there. And in a sort of misguided effort to try to regenerate that, to put funding to help that community grow again, you have the allocation of significant federal dollars to tear down what they view as blight and expect that it's going to come back up in a somewhat similar but revived way compared to how it had been before. And the ball kind of drops there, or at least the dream that many people have is not fulfilled. And so you end up with a community that's heritage has been ripped out of this specific place where it was, displaced widely. And there are precious few places today that you can go to on the south side that connect with that deeper 150-year-old community that had grown up there.
So think about that for a second. So in 1939, we talked about the structure of the public housing system, which was driven by policy and local government. It created this. Well, we created the infrastructure to thrive. And the city comes in, and one thing about it is, through political connections, Spartanburg received a much larger proportion of those federal funds through political influence, in the political government. So we had a lot of money. And so didn't meet with the community to say, hey, what can we do to do what Brad projected? And this is what we're going to do to you. Destroyed that infrastructure that was created over many, many years. Destroyed it. I mean, Spartanburg had his own, thriving economic engine right behind us. Liberty Street is right there. It ran all the way downtown. You had everything you needed. And it was destroyed by the city, the organization I work for. And I'm able to speak to this truth because our political leadership has recognized the role that the government played for years. And so when people ask, why are you doing this? Why do you build this facility? Why do you put a swimming pool in a community where the belief system of many that black people don't swim? I was at a meeting downtown, Dr. Harrison, it was a chamber meeting. Nothing against one Spartanburg. It was a chamber meeting, not one Spartanburg. And same organization, different time period. And it was like, why are they putting that facility in that neighborhood? They don't even swim. And so these stories are so important because 40, 50 years earlier, Sister Kay, there was a pool at Cleveland Park that we were not allowed to swim at, which is in the same neighborhood. But desegregation, they closed the pool because we're not going to swim with it. But here we are, 2020, we want to build a pool, and they're against us building the pool for those. And so these stories are so important, and why we're doing those things. The billions of dollars that was spent to destroy the infrastructure led to black professionals leaving the community and not wanting to come back today because of how they were treated and what happened. It was a thriving community. It's important to tell these stories and to talk about the intentionality, where's the intentionality of our government to do those things. Those are all part of a plan. It's not an opinion, it's fact.
Yes, Brad used that term, displaced heritage. Brad came over to kind of give me an idea of like whether you are here when you're at the monument. There's going to be a section of the monument that places you in relationship to you know, South of Main, what South of Main is talking about, Liberty Street. Where was that space and where you're standing right now, right? That's very powerful as an experience. And so we looked at the maps that were, do you remember the year that map was created? It had 54, 1954.
The comp plan, the city commissioned in 1954, and this map, it identifies what's the term it uses, predominant non-white areas, and so it has little shaded to give you an idea of what the neighborhoods were. So we, go ahead.
So we juxtaposed the image, or did like a see-through layer of today's map over it, and it was devastating for me to see that entire corridor just no longer existed. It still exists though in the hearts of women that have passed down that displaced heritage, that displaced culture. So I think the formation of the African American History and Culture Committee is integral in reviving, like revitalizing, but also restoring that narrative. And so you have the community weavers, for example, that through educational spaces created the traveling trunks. And it was amazing. I mean, these are artifacts. You're going through and seeing women, I'm literally getting choked up about it. You're going through and seeing women collecting these images, much like in here, local Spartanburg narratives, and presenting them to students. This is going from school to school. And so I don't remember how long ago these were made, and I don't think they're really being implemented in education right now. But looking at also the ways that if there was an attempt to hold on to that history, it's not, I can say it's not erased. I think displaced is the better term. It's not completely erased. And also giving, you know, homage to those women and men that were able to continue those narratives.
So on that historical track, just a little bit, we talked about in the 60s and the 70s and at the height of urban renewal, and you have the infrastructure changes of the Black community, and think again about the concentration of public housing. So you have this leadership, the support system that begins to lead the city. They begin teachers who work in the schools, living amongst their kids, leading the city. All of this started happening in the 60s and 70s. Y'all know what happened in the 80s? Crack cocaine. I was a part of that. I saw stuff every day in my neighborhood that was unbelievable. So from the 80s and the 90s, and so people like, you know, they look at these things and they're like, why are they doing this, why are they doing that? They don't think about the decisions we made. Those two critical decisions about the decision about public housing and urban renewal. So people can ask me the question like, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? Tell the story.
Many times people don't understand that the conditions of our communities, the way they were, was done because that was how it was done. You know, you can't say, look at those people and how they're living when the system created those conditions in which they live. So I think, like what Ms. said, it's accountability. You know, we preach accountability to people every day and all day about that. And it's just time for accountability on all parts, you know, on all sides. Because these conditions, you know, African Americans find themselves in these conditions by happenstance. It was intentional, it was purposeful. And that's what we have to say. These conversations are hard to have, but if we want to move the needle forward, we have to have these hard conversations. We have to be able to pull it out. We can't pick and choose our history. You know, we can't choose those parts that only make us feel good. As I heard in the morning on CBS Morning News with this lady who was talking about our history. And we just have to be intentional about it. And knowing that if we want to go forward in this country and do the things and mean what we say when we talk about equity and inclusion, then we gotta look at our history. We gotta say these things were done wrong, these things were done intentionally, and we have to be just as intentional about changing it as we were doing it in the first place.
If you're ready to pivot to the present a little bit, because I think the timing is there. One little remark that I want to say that I think is a mistake that the past did structurally, that I think has been corrected largely in the more recent years. You talked about a top-down sort of approach, like the city came onto the community and they said, we see this as a problem, this is how we're going to solve it. Are you okay with that? Or like some level of engagement with it, but it's directed from above. From my perspective, the city today, and I don't know how recent that really is a thing, is much more feel out what the room says of hold these public engagement sessions where we're hearing what people who are showing up have as thoughts about an issue, and then crafting policy based off of that sort of.
But there's a period before we got there. And I do have to acknowledge that, and we talked about leadership earlier. Before we got to this point that we are today, I have to acknowledge those individuals like Hudson Barksdale, Brenda Lee Price, and other, LNC Watson. I mean, you look at a lot of these facilities, these were individuals that were fighting for our people for many years. They created that history of advocacy in Spartanburg. We have a long history of leadership and advocacy. So I don't want to create this perception that the city woke up and got it, and it's always been community driven. The approach has changed a little bit today. Harold Mitchell, unbelievable, nationally recognized for the things that he's done around in environmental justice. So there's the Ernest Rice Sr., my neighborhood, it really helped change the city and how we do community development. From taking a house by house approach to how do you transform communities. This guy lost his life when trying to save his neighborhood. And so prior to that period, during the period of the 80s and 90s, we had a strong history of leadership. We had two of the largest public housing complexes on the south side, Toll Parkwell and Phillips Barnes. They were less than a quarter of a mile from each other. And what took place in those neighborhoods in the 80s, early 90s was very challenging from a concentration of poverty. But through leadership, we received 2 whole 6th grades, $20 million, unprecedented for a community of our size within a 10-year period. We could not have this meeting in this neighborhood, Tony, as you know, 20 years ago. Probably 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, but 20 years ago. We was here for a list meeting. We had a meeting here with List. And I was sitting right here, part of a panel discussion, and there were 4 white men that were jogging up the street. I said, look, that wouldn't have taken place 15 years ago in this neighborhood. And a lot of it had to do with Harold Mitchell, Brenda Lee Price, and the others that were fighting for these things before we got to the approach that we're taking today.
And if I may add, all of these policies and things happened, and we can go way back to the 70s. I was born in 1965. I'm a product of the whole civil rights movement. I grew up with a nervous stomach, if you will, because I saw these things happen around me as a child. And I do remember in my learning of the history that during the Nixon era, I think McNamara was maybe his Secretary of State. African Americans have been fighting for a lot of things, and they were like, they're still not happy. What's going on? They're fighting, they're still not happy. What are we gonna do? So that's when they came up with this policy on benign neglect. Many didn't know about that and heard about that. And that policy said, we're not gonna promise them anything, therefore we don't have to deliver anything. So when that happened, all of these things that were happening all were happening at the same time. So our communities just died. You had urban renewal, which Brad spoke about earlier, and then you had these other things happening. And then with the policy of benign neglect, then we find ourselves in the situation we're in today. So these collaborations, these things that Mitch was talking about now, they must take place in order to rectify the past, because there were policies. These weren't things that just happened because there was poverty. These were policies that were made and put in place.
Can we give them a round of applause for that? I do just want to add, if you want to know more about South of Main, Ms. Bernice Price Group is at Upstate. Yes. So please, ma'am, please, sir, do yourself a service by picking that book up today, so you can learn more about South of Main. So I posed this question to my mom and Tony yesterday. Why did we have to be home before the street light came on? So my mom said, because if you didn't, I was gonna get that tape. That's just be honest. That's what my mom said. And she said, no. You better be home before the street light came on, because we don't know if you're gonna ever make it home again. That was the real truth. She said, baby, you can't be out when it's dark. because now they're scouting for you. So that's why we had to be home before the street light came on. So we're gonna jump into the present, hopefully we get to the future. My personal question is, how do we avoid urban renewal 2.0?
I think one way we can do it is by what we're attempting to do today in communities like the North Side, is coming in and speaking with the people of the community, learning what the people of the community want, not thinking you can come in the community and know what's best for that community. That was the intention of this North Side initiative. Many of you understand that and read about it and know that. But I think if we're going to move forward, that's what we have to do. We can't feel that we have the answers to people's problems and solutions. You know, we have to say it in North Side, we move at the speed of trust. Nothing can be done unless you can trust the people that you're working with. So when this initiative started, they came to the community and said, who in this community wants positive change for this community? And that's how the Borders came along. We have Miss Debbie Moore, who's a long lifetime resident of the North Side community. She's the first African-American journalist for WSPA. We have Phoenix Miller, who's a doula. All the Borders serve a particular role in the community and bring a special thing to the Borders. And all of us have a different thing that we contribute to that. And I think if we're going to avoid urban renewal 2.0, then we have to consider listening to people. You know, you have ears on mouth for a reason. And don't think that you have all the answers. Talk to the people that you want to affect. You know, people have when you talk about creating healthy communities, when people have a role and a say in the things that affect their lives, that in itself creates healthy communities. So you can't come in and decide what's good for me if you haven't talked to me. So if we want to avoid urban renewal, that's where we start. Now, other people on this panel may have other ideas about it, but I feel that that's one definite way that we can avoid urban renewal 2.0.
You said it. I will apply the government perspective to that. It really. So in 2020, our city council did a resolution apologizing. The reason I'm able to speak to what the past and the errors, because my elected officials have enabled me to speak truth to what we have done. You gotta acknowledge. Progress moves at the speed of trust. We were in Holland, gosh, it was about 10 years ago. We were talking about a project, and there was a lady there who had gone through her renewal. She said, why y'all trying to take my house? Meeting had nothing to do with it. Why y'all trying to take my house? What are you talking about? But in her mind, the city's called a meeting, y'all didn't come to my neighborhood, you trying to take something from me. Because that's what her experience was. And so now when I go to meetings, the first thing I try to do is acknowledge that we haven't always gotten it right. Okay? First thing I do, I don't even call the meeting. Mr. Jeter calls me and invites me. So what Tony says, we got to be very intentional about who's in charge. It's a shift of power. And what we're doing here in our community, I believe, is quite special with how we're investing in those who should be leading the change. Tony's a recent graduate of Grassroots Leadership Development Institute. Tony Sutton is in the audience. Tony here is a part of the board, which is an intentional training development. We have a new training institute happening in the Highland Institute. We got 20 people that are going to get this intense training in community-based leadership, equipping those that should be leading with the tools to lead. And they invited me. We talked about equity. So I heard this whole viewpoint around diversity, inclusion, and equity, Dr. Harris. They say diversity is being invited to the party, right? Inclusion is being invited to dance. Equity is you throw the party. And you invite me, okay? That's what equity is about. It's a very intentional investment in moving the needle. And I think we're doing it here in Spartanburg pretty well. We have some lessons learned about it. We're still working on the South Side, Tony, to do that. But it's intentional investment in those that really should equip. I'll tell this quick story. Highland, we have a $2.2 million park there in the neighborhood. And a lot of people question why would we make that investment during that particular time period. We have one of the nicest basketball courts in the state of South Carolina and Highland. I took a lot of pride in that basketball court. And we had the nice backboards, fiberglass backboards, We could lower, break, settle down. Nobody else had this. 2 weeks after opening, somebody shot out the back door. I was high. I was livid. I got a phone call. I went to Mr. Jeter, who's been in there. I said, Mr. Jeter, man, what are we doing? He said, let me do my homework. Let me find out what's going on. Called me back. He said, you be closing the park too early. No problem. How late you need to let it stay open? That's the only incident we've had, and that park opened in 2014. It was one of the highest crime-ridden areas in our entire county. Crime is going like that. That park is not a city park. That's a Highland Park. It's ownership. Sustainability has to include community ownership. You can't talk about sustainability if the people who are most impacted don't own the process and don't own, what's there. And so I think that's the change. That's how we avoid it.
Time to think about it. So we're thinking about this on an institutional level, but I do want to talk about it on a personal level in regards to understanding how you can be a listener in the space that you're in your own communities. It's not a matter of coming into one community and thinking of it as this petri dish where you're going to come in and learn about the African American experience. It's more about realizing within your own experience as an individual, you can start making impacts. I like to think of it as a mirror that you're holding up to yourself and saying, how can I be a better listener? But I also at the same time realizing that there's a learning curve involved in that. So being patient with yourself. So that's for people that are outside of the community, for people from the community and of the community, is realizing that it takes time for people to be good listeners. And understanding, don't let your frustration with the results not happening when you think they should stop you. See this as an opportunity for equal exchange in expanding each other's experience. So I think it's most important. We're looking at this at an institutional level, but a lot of this starts with self. It really does.
That's a very good point. And I want to talk about tokenism for a second. Oh, I know I was a token for many years. No doubt. And I was 25 years old, a young professional in this community, back in 95, 96, I was serving on my first board. I was so young and naive. So they would be like, so Mitch, what does the black community feel about this and feel about that? I am so young and naive, I thought I had to answer, okay? Dr. Woodward was like, I didn't know, but I attempted to answer. And that still happens today. It still happens today. Some of you all are part of it. Some of you tokens, you don't realize that you're on board and don't see anybody else look like you. It's not just about color or anything. It's like what you represent, what you bring to the table, right? We have to be very intentional about creating diverse environments. And it is an individual piece. We all have the ability. Whether you're part of an organization, you have to slow down to go further, right? Institutions, you have these grants that you're trying to meet these, and so let's have a meeting in this neighborhood and get about 10 people and get their ideas. It doesn't always work like that. That's not sustainable, right? How are they invested in the process? How are you ensuring investment takes place with those that have the ability to own? Tony's sitting here. I never forget, you talk about some of my own people right now. NAACP, love them to death. So we were, anybody in NAACP members, it's not about you, it's about the process sometimes. And so we were Oakville Apartments on the north side. We went through a master planning process. The neighborhood drove the decisions like, hey, you know what? These families should not live in these conditions. This is the structure that we're going to put in place to transition them. And the neighborhood was leading the discussion and everything. So we have people who were eating at the table, leading the discussion, but then we had people on the outside that were snacking, coming in, dipping in, and dipping out. And so they come in, dip in, and dip out, and they're going to charge the city with displacement. Why y'all do this? I said, hold on, brother. Call Tony Thomas. I can't talk to you. Tony put them in check. This is what we're doing. This is my neighborhood. It made that process so simple. It is important. And I really, I'm not trying to shame and blame the NAACP, but everybody does that. You sit on the sideline and are snacking and not really eating from the table. You know, you want to create sustainable communities, help create a table where we can all sit together and talk about what we desire, what we want collectively together.
I want to piggyback on Mitchell, then I'll hand it right back to you. So at the very start of the Northside Initiative, we had an opportunity to go before the NAACP and share. And at that time, one of our representatives was temporary interim president at the time. And I was with our quarterback and our project manager. And they weren't of the same ethnic background as myself or the many people there. So we got questioned and they were throwing questions out. One question was, were you gonna gentrify that community? You know, whatever. I said, well, 47% of the community is boarded up. You know, what we're trying to do is we're trying to take those boarded up homes and create some home ownership, some affordable housing. You know, not market rate. We know that the mixed income model is good works, but our focus is what our people can afford. And then they said, well, you're gonna melt the voting strength of that community. I said, well, we need your help because I walked through that community with our representative, who's the representative of our community right now, City Erica Brown. And she had the list of every house in that community had a voter or no voter. So I told that committee, I said, well, we need your help to come in our community and start some voter registration drives, or teach us how to do it. Because I know our community is not voting like it should. So it's not about gentrification, and it's not about voting any voter strength that we don't already have. So when you look at the details of these things, the voters were told, you're at the table, but you're not eating. And I said, well, give us time. That's your opinion. And I think at this point, if the intention was for us not to be eating, then they probably would have never engaged us, because there's not a single decision that comes through the Northside Initiative that the voters don't hear from first. We voice our opinion about it, we like it, we go forward with it, we don't, we try to make compromises, or we don't even include that idea at all. So if you don't believe that communities can lead change in their communities, it can happen. You just have to be there. You know, we have to be present. We have to be upfront and present. We can't sit back and expect other people to do our work for us. It's never happened in the past. You know, and I think about the civil rights movement when people would say, oh, we ain't gonna get the vote. I don't know why those black folks out there marching like that, but they ain't gonna never allow us to do it. But it was a few that did compared to those naysayers that were sitting back in the chairs, in the seats on their porches, looking and laughing and talking. But when that right came, those people in those chairs benefited just like the ones who out there marching and fighting. And we didn't do that alone. There were many other people that marched with us and carried that banner with us. And to what you said earlier, Lakeisha, about the be home before the lights is out, when I was at Tuskegee University in my studies, studying to be an architect, we would have to go to Auburn University for supplies because at that time, Tuskegee didn't have the bookstore. You know, we have an awesome HBCU. I love Tuskegee, but we didn't have an adequate bookstore. So we would have to go to Auburn University to get books and the supplies I needed, especially for architecture. It was very expensive. And you know, I remember many times they tell us, don't let the sun go down on you, black, you know what, you better get back to Tuskegee. So, and we have to understand the context of that. And what that is that, you know, our parents, out of safety concerns for us, wanted to be in the house before dark. But on a socioeconomic standpoint, we were in the house because we were afraid for our lives. You know, before slavery ended, you know, there was no need for police. After slavery ended, you had the police. All of a sudden, there's this idea of policing. And what that was about was protecting white people from the free black slaves. And, you know, we can't have all these free black slaves running around the world, they might come and take my stuff. So that's where the origination of the police came. So we have to understand that dynamic. When you talk about where we are today, when you see that there's two dynamics with the police force, you know, there's one where they protect and serve, and the other where they keep us in check. So we have to change that, and it has to start with us. Oh yeah, that's what I want to do.
So I wrote down everybody's name. I'm a note taker, and I'm still taking notes from the panelists. What's this mean?
You got it right.
Thank you.
I'm conducting this meeting to wrap it up.
Okay, I always wrap up when I have them, like, okay. But this idea, okay, so I wrote down the names of organizations that people mentioned, and I'm like, that organization probably has a vision statement. Right, and what does the vision statement represent? The ideal goal of that organization. Now, whether or not it's actually attainable is another thing. I think when you're at the table, it should be clear on what the community's vision is for itself, what each individual member's vision is for themselves, and how each of you can contribute towards that vision. So when there are moments of frustration or miscommunication, take a break and then pull that vision statement out. And remind yourselves of why you're both there. That's the common goal that you have. So I think whenever you embark collaboratively with any institution, whether I'm a sole proprietor of my studio, so I had to come up with my own vision statement. But I'm thinking, when I'm collaborating with someone, what is my vision? And how is this person amplifying that vision or contributing to that vision? But equally so, I look at how I can contribute to their vision as well. So that's more on the structural basis. So 2 ways, structurally is shared vision, and the other way is independent, individual expansion.
I just wanted to highlight this real quick, because I know what Gail said, we want to talk about the uniqueness of our neighborhoods. In this handout here, we highlight some of these stories about the north side, about Highland, and about the south side. So, you have this, I think we have a QR code if you don't have a copy. So this tells a little bit more about, what happens in these neighborhoods and what we're doing today. So I just want to mention that.
So can we give our panelists a round of applause? I just want to add 2 tidbits. I was talking to Dr. Harris earlier, and I was saying one of our greatest disparities is the lack of representation. And I'm so thankful to see people that I can aspire to be like. Dr. K being one of those people, organically, I just happened to, when I lived on the south side, I lived in Highland, I lived on the north side, so I lived in all 3 communities. I would just see her, and she was always forward. She was always upright. She always told, hey baby. And that would be it. And that was enough for me to aspire to go higher. Not knowing what my mom went through to avoid living in public housing, she would jump house to house so that we wouldn't live in public housing and we wouldn't be sent off to Boston. When did I learn that? Yesterday. Right? So we have some lived experiences that you may not be aware of. I was hired because the board just said, we need someone to go into Oakview and do some hand holding to get them each family moved out. 98 families. I had to meet with them daily, and sometimes at night, 2 and 3 a.m., making sure they had food, right? And so you never know what that led to. Our crime rate went down by 8% by moving each of those families out of Oakview. And so we could go on and on and on, but I thank you all for your time. One last thing, on tomorrow, there is an epic meeting. It's novel, it's never happened before. Again, I've lived in Northside, Highland, and Southside. These 3 communities are coming together with their leaders, and you get to hear from each of those leaders, their perspectives, dispelling myths, and how to come together better. And so if you can't be here tomorrow, please ma'am, please sir, tomorrow at 11, from 11 to 12:30, I would say be here by 10:50, because on time is late. And now we're gonna, we can't do it. I'm sorry, we don't have the time. But the panelists will be around for your individual questions. I do apologize. We only reserve this space for a limited amount of time. We're gonna turn it back over to Ms. Gail. Thank you.
Regarding the Urban League, I love sort of that it ended on vision, right? I think that's what all of this has been about, and the work moving forward is also about vision. The Urban League, so yes, we represent the 10 counties. We certainly, our office in Greenville is at the University Center in the former office of the Greenville Tech Foundation, so that's where we are. Recently, the city of Greenville gave us the historic McLaren Medical Shelter building on the corner of Academy and Wardlaw Street, which is just as you go to Unity Park. That was started by a black physician who also had some relationships here in Spartanburg. Our board members are
very diverse and represent the 10 counties. We do also have Jay Jenkins from One Spartanburg, Small Minority Business Development. My soror, our First Lady Frankie Harris is on our board. Josh Foster, if that name means anything to you, Spartanburg folks. Josh Foster went to school here, you know him. Started the film festival. He went to the Darla Moore School of Business, became a banker. His love for film took him to New York, to the Tisch School, NYU of film. He now is an executive with Cinetic Media. They finance independent films such as Moonlight, The Green Book, Little Miss Sunshine. So he also is very interested in the work we're doing here and has joined our board. He wants to see this initiative happen in Spartanburg. So all of our board members reflect kind of the direction that we're going. Right before I was hired, I read about an independent filmmaker that was now from LA to Atlanta, moving to the Upstate. And when I heard about that, I knew that the Urban League in LA, their entrepreneurship program was about the film industry. Right? The Urban League in Atlanta all of a sudden started an entrepreneurship program about the film industry. Okay, we know what the film industry has done in Atlanta. When I heard about this gentleman moving from Atlanta, wanting to come to the Upstate, right? I called him or emailed him, sight unseen, and said, because what? If one is coming, more will come. So, I sent him an email, said, I'm the president and CEO of the Urban League. I've not been hired yet, small detail. When you come, what's your philosophy on working with minority and small businesses in the film industry? He was very open to that. That is how we got connected. So then what I found out was the University of South Carolina was starting an initiative, right, to develop a film curriculum at USC in Columbia. Why? Because 95% of the filming is done where? In Charleston, right? Which represents a huge amount of revenue. I think it's like $64 million or something. And last year we had to turn away so much because we don't have all the infrastructure in place to bring more filming. How much of that is happening here? How much of that revenue from that industry is coming here? Right? It is happening just across the border in Asheville. So why is it not happening here? So what I knew that in working with the South Carolina Film Commission, they made a commitment because we have USC Upstate, because we have the talent and they've been wanting to do this, they have designated the Urban League of the Upstate as their community partner to help literally bring film industry, independent filmmaking to the Upstate. So that's what we're doing. We're following this model. We have put a letter of intent on building a state-of-the-art virtual studio, which will be in one of these communities that we have discussed. And we are also doing a screening room. Thank you so much to the Chapman Cultural Center and to the Spartanburg County Foundation. They gave us some seed money this fall to try this initiative. We did a film symposium. We had people from Columbia, of course, Greenville, from the mayor's office, from the visitor center, and even Charlotte come to learn about this initiative. We're going to do a full day. With some of the money we got from Chapman Cultural Center, we had some high school students, young men of color. We paid them $100 a month to participate as interns in this, to learn how to make a short film. Smith Ali led that for us. That initiative was so successful that the Clemson Men of Color Summit, which happens at the Convention Center, has asked us to present that initiative. Okay, so we are committed to this this enterprise. We're going to, you'll hear more about that. I have my business cards. We want to talk. We want to support because we know that the film industry represents beauticians their support of their work. We have that information. I'd love to see you all. We have our business cards.
So we're going to wrap up. I did want to say Ms. Woodward brought some of these wonderful calendars for anyone, I assume for anyone who wants some African American historical calendar for 2023. They're beautiful. So I want to thank our panel. As a couple of people said, you know, and I'm sure we've all heard it, why do we talk about our history? Because if we don't understand and learn from our history, we tend to repeat our history. And there's a lot of history that we don't want to repeat. And so it is very important, and Tony and everybody really talked about, you know, the intentionality moving forward. There's great models here in Spartanburg. There's models in other places. We have to just keep moving forward and working collaboratively to do that. Because, you know, I think one of the beliefs of Tent at the Top is that we want to make sure that every person who lives here in this region has the opportunity to achieve their greatest level of success. And we can't do that if we don't understand some of the challenges and barriers that keep people from being able to achieve that level of success. So that's why sessions like this are important. Gail and I have been kind of talking here and said, you know, we want to have this conversation continue and do it again, not necessarily in February, but, you know, across the board, because it is important. And I thank everybody for being part of this today. Our next Upstate Connect, which will be held in March, I guess on March 10th, is going to be on community safety. And that was alluded to today as often a challenge, and we see it in the news and things. And that will be held in Greenville at our office. You will get, one of the things we do for all of these sessions is we send an email with the list of attendees so you can connect with each other. And we'll also send information about the next session coming up in March. So again, I want to thank everybody for being part of this. Oh, I understand one of my board members, Dr. Harris, has taken the mic.
This is going to be quick. I just want to thank the panel, thank the Urban League and the Upstate, and thank all of you. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say this. There is an attack on our ability to tell the story, okay, across the country. What is happening in Florida, what is happening in Texas, what is happening in South Carolina, impede our ability to tell the story. And it's not about imposing stress on any group, but it's about being able to tell the truth about what is happening, what has happened, and how it impacts the fabric of who we are. All of these structural issues that Mitch and so many talked about with regard to our ability to build our community. This community can be taken from Spartanburg to anywhere in the country and it would have the exact same story. So this doesn't need to be a Black History Month story. We got young people who need to be a part of this. At the age that I am now, I thought, Mitch, when I was 25 and invited to the room, that I knew it all. Or that what I had to say was so unique that they brought me to the table. It had nothing to do with that. And the older I become, the more I realize what I didn't know. And I've come to have the humility and the empty cup where I can say now that it's an act. We need you at the table, and we need you at the table. And all of us contribute to our ability to make this a better community. The missing folks at this table are our Black males. They're missing in higher education, they're missing in the homes, they're missing in a number of communities. So we have to invite them and elevate their voice to their future. Because if we don't bring them, the Andrew Youngs, the John Lewis, the Clyburns, they're going to be gone. And who's going to be the advocate to get the federal dollars and to get the support to build these communities? So either we become much more intentional about inviting these voices to the table, helping them to see what's possible, and helping them to see the excellence and the beauty that exists within them. The story that we're going to be telling 10 years from now is going to be much harder and different than the stories of the 70s. and the stories of the 60s. So let's not become so comfortable that I have come to realize that we need folks like me in education, we need community activists, we need people who are willing to go to the street, and all of us add value. And what we have to do is stop criticizing people in their way of telling and advocating for what's important to them. And all of us saying we all contribute. We need to stop calling people Uncle Toms because they choose to do it differently. And we need to appreciate what they bring and how they choose to contribute. So this is a very powerful message that that you all have taken on today, but it cannot just be a conversation we come and talk about and put ourselves on the back of what we did last year. Our future is at stake. Seriously at stake. I'm reading through a lot of legislation about what I can say and cannot say, and what stories I can and cannot tell. How that looks, we don't know. But if we are a democracy, and we value the American democracy, what we brought to the table, we all have to have a voice in this, and we have to be a lot more aggressive and assertive and serious about the impact that these things that are happening will have, not just on us, but on our kids and our future. Thank you.
Wow, okay, well, and again, and I also want to say just holistically to everyone, just very clear, what we talked about today was not just Black history, it's our community history. And so I think everybody who's here in this room, and I learned at our event in November when we talked about inclusion and how to make sure we're just not diverse, but we're also inclusive of things, is that as a white male who grew up in a place that was very inclusive, white and Black people working together and being friends from the beginning of my life, I didn't really think that you had to be, as a white male, anything more than just yourself. Well, and what I'm learning now is we have to be intentional as white people who are part of this and believe in everyone having the right to have their greatest life, that we all play a role. And I think what Dr. Harris and everybody is saying is critically important. We could go on about this for hours. What I will say is this is a conversation that needs to be continued. I appreciate everyone who's here. Be engaged in your community and make sure that you're playing a role in making it the community you want it to be, regardless of wherever you are. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Thank you for allowing us to be here in this wonderful facility, and I hope you have a great weekend.